now when you mentioned these goat type looking demons or beings, like satyrs, um, you're probably familiar with the ancient deity called Pan, and this was he was or it was worshipped and deified even before Jesus and the apostles. But I'm also reminded because this deity was also popular in the times of Jesus, when especially when he was going through Caesarea Philippi region, and what he calls the gates of heaven was the entrance of the cave where was Mountain Hermon located close by, and to this deity there were sacrifices being brought to. So when I'm thinking, when you're talking about satyrs and these goat demons or beings, I don't know why, but quickly an image or a thought went through my mind about a god Pan. So can can he or it be maybe the god of these creatures, or is there any similarity or any connection between Pan and then satyrs and these goat-like furry creatures?
So questions of identity in an ancient pagan context are exceptionally convoluted. For the very simple reason that our vision of ancient, like Greco-Roman paganism, is like it's almost entirely literary, and those literary records are I don't want to say confabulations, but they're sort of later assemblages of very disparate material, just sort of assembled by Greek and Roman poets with the assumption that it referred to some overarching mythology that's often, sometimes and often not the case. This is especially brutal in the case of Pan, as I think it was Cicero notes. It might be a different Roman theologian. There were like a dozen different god Pans. Like we can talk about everything from like the Pan that most people think of, who just waltzes around like having sex with nymphs, to a sort of there was a Pan of the mist of the Orphics, who was he was the anthropological embodiment of man. We can get into that later, because some early Christian sources actually touch on that one, chiefly Clement and to a lesser extent Eusebius. But he's definitely not the same entity as like the Pan of popular myth. And then we can further break this down into like there's the Pan of is it the Aeneid? No, sorry, Ovid. Pan of Ovid. That's a totally different entity, or at least it's totally different identity, I should say. And then of course there's also Ovid's Fasti. So sorry, yeah, correct author, but Ovid wrote a work on Roman holidays. That's one of our best sources on Roman folklore, and in it he talks about how Pan tricked Zeus to help the Romans build Rome, along with the woodpecker god. Nobody remembers. And then, of course, you have the satyr Marsyas. Famous, he's best known for having challenged Apollo to a musical contest, where he wanted to play, I want to say the pipe. It was definitely some sort of like woodwind instrument, and Apollo played the lute. And when Apollo realized he was losing, he's like, fine, but the victor can't just be decided by who has musical skill. It has to be decided by who has singing skill. And obviously you can't sing while you're playing a pipe. Marsyas was flayed alive. What many people don't know is this wasn't an arbitrary story. This was the Hieros Logos describing how Marsyas turned into a river god. So he underwent the pagan equivalent of theosis, attained deity status. This is connected to a couple post-Jesus mystery cults, and one possibly pre-Jesus one, but of course.
So basically, like you said, because this topic is so vague and because there are so many deities called Pan, and their description doesn't match, so we can't make with certain, we cannot be so certain that Pan was somehow related to satyrs. Maybe just the goat kind of description of his personality or body, or the whole body image or face. Maybe they have something in common like that. But from what I'm getting from you is like that they're not connected in any more intimate way than that.
It's probably the same sort of entity, but saying like Pan's the ruler of the satyrs, or Pan, like talking about a relation would be convoluted. There's very little archaeological evidence that the satyrs followed Pan's orders as such. Um, like I wouldn't want to say he's in any. I mean, like obviously our poetry is like, yeah, Pan, Lord of the Satyrs, but then there's also Silenus and Rusticus and Faunus. And all of these are sort of like squooshed together in like the medley of syncretism and union that was so characteristic of late antique paganism. But like sort of same entity, it would be, but it might be better to just think of him as like a deified satyr.